Hi everyone, this is Liane, and this is from the heart. Today the topic is surrogacy. I've kind of realized that there's some controversy around it, and which is great. And there's good reason for some controversy. I just wanted to show the other side of it. And we'll see. Like there doesn't have to be a side; it could be dualistic as well. I had a client, Chandra, who had two babies with me. They are her own, and then she decided to be a surrogate after that. And so then I had questions. I'm like, hey, what happens in Canada? Because I don't know the legal things, and I wasn't with you with the surrogate babies, but I have been a midwife to some other clients that have had surrogate that were surrogates. And so there's things I know and there's things I don't know, and we'll just have a conversation. And there's a lot of like the reason why some people are against it is because there are places in the world or just circumstances where people are needing money and then they get trapped, and some things that might be ethical or unethical there. And so I just want to also like we can use this as like an expander episodes of like what makes surrogacy safer and ethical, and where do we go from here kind of thing, because there are some people who are looking for and they just need to know that like there are good options out there. It doesn't have to feel unethical. It doesn't have to feel like you're having to, yeah. So anyways, I have questions for you, Chandra. Do you want to start off with who you are and what led you to surrogacy in the first place?
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for reaching out. I love talking about this. I love talking about my family, and this is now part of my family, but I love talking about it. And I love when people say like, oh, I hope you don't mind. Can I ask you questions? And I love it because it starts a conversation, and it's a lot of people don't know until they know. And I had someone once say to me, you're the first surrogate I've ever met. And I thought, isn't that beautiful? Like now you know one, and I don't think I know any either, aside from me. So yeah. My name is Chandra, and I have two beautiful girls that are my own. Tessa is 9, almost 9. Alice is 5, and I have the most wonderful husband. He is very much a part of all of these things that happen. So I do need to make sure he is known. And I have a job that I love. And I just have a life that I'm so grateful that I've been able to build. So, that's me. And these buttes, I can tell you how this came to be. It was sort of an accident. It was in the summer of 2021. I saw like an Instagram post of like, oh, there's these folks who need a surrogate. Like if anyone, knows anyone. And that just started something. And I sort of thought, I wonder if that would be for me. And I sort of looked into it, and I actually reached out to the couple, and we started chatting. And at that time, there was a lot going on in my life. And so I ended up speaking with my own, my nurse practitioner, who's my primary care provider. And we decided it wasn't the right time for me right then. But I talked to the couple, and I said, you carry on with your journey. I'm going to take a pause on this for right now. But maybe, in a year or so, I'll revisit it when the time is right. So they found a lovely surrogate, and they have a beautiful baby now. So that was in the summer of 2021. And then, my husband and I, Brian, we went to a wedding of our friends in June of 2022. And they made a joke at their wedding. It was a complete joke. They weren't trying to solicit anyone. They made a joke, and they had embryos that were actually 3 days old or something like that at their wedding. Like the embryos were just being made. And they made a joke. They said, so if anyone knows a surrogate, we're looking so we can build our family. And I went up to them later and I said, hey, like I got you. Like I would love to do that for you. and it was a wedding. We had all had some drinks. So like a week later, I reached out to them again and I said, hey, like, I know, maybe you thought it was offhand, but like, I really did mean it. I'm here for whatever you need. Let me know. And then that was the start of everything.
Wow, that's so cool. It wasn't even through an agency. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Okay. And then after that, what does like the process look like? Like what's the legalities or whatever else we have to think of?
Yeah, it's a lot. And a lot of folks will say, whoa, did you have a contract? Like in Canada, you absolutely need a contract before you do anything. And that's like the agencies, like no one will do anything until you have a contract. So it's a same-sex couple. So one of the dads is a lawyer, which was very helpful for when we are, discussing all the things we have to discuss. But essentially what happens is I had my own lawyer and they had their own lawyer, and I call them the dads. They're two lovely friends of mine. But they pay for everything. And I think that's important that everyone knows that, like the start of everything. So absolutely anything that happened, either I would pay for it and they would reimburse me, or they would pay for it right up front. So I had my own lawyer that the dads paid for. And but before we even get to the lawyer piece, I had to be medically approved. So what that is they connected me with their agency where their embryos were. Happened to be in Toronto. I'm in Ottawa, which not a problem. They connected me and I had to pass first I had to pass a psychological screening. Myself and my husband, we both had to pass one. And then I had to pass a full medical screening. Brian did have to do some medical screening as well, just because he's my partner. And like, I didn't have an up-to-date PAP. So like I needed to, go down to the basics. And then I had to go to Toronto. So I flew out to Toronto, did full panel of medical screening. I went through like a whole system. It felt like I just passed from one person to the next. And but it was fine, but it really was like a conveyor belt system. And then once we got my approval, then we went to the lawyers. And so when we went to the lawyers, we built a contract, and I built the contract with my lawyer. And then I think it was, I forget how it was approved. I can't remember if their lawyer created it and mine approved it or whatever it was, and we needed two separate lawyers so that someone was always on my side, right? There was no conflict of interest, which was really important. So then we had to do that. That took some time. So from the day that we agreed that we would do this until the day we were entirely cleared, like the contract signed, because the clinic wouldn't even talk about dates until the contract was signed, it was 9 months. And that felt like a really long time. So the guys and I, we have a fantastic relationship. We were actually on the same page with everything. So 9 months, but with us being on the same page, like none of that was us sort of, okay, well, let's figure this out. Maybe we don't agree with that. That's with us agreeing to like with each other on every topic. It just so happened that that's how it worked out. And in my real life, I'm an administrator. And so I'm very good at doing administration, and I'm very on top of paperwork and things like that. So it was 9 months with us being incredibly on top of things and incredibly on the same page.
Wow, that's the first baby.
Yeah. Yeah. We made a baby before we made a baby.
Yeah.
We could have. And yeah, so that's what it was. We got everything in place, and then it was just waiting for the next cycle, right? You're always sort of, oh, can we catch this one? And I wonder. And then we were cleared in January of 2023. So then we started our first cycle in February. Like it was slow, and then it was quick with everything, I feel like, with babies.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had this contract. This contract's like 30 or 40 pages.
Wow.
And in the contract, we had to discuss and agree on so many topics, absolutely anything that you can imagine. We had to have agreed upon it. The contract lays out exactly what they would pay for, and it includes just the most minute details that you could think of, and that's something that the lawyers, like, they thought of more than I would ever think of, like down to mileage and parking, things like that, down to food. And there's a postpartum period that they cover as well. And like absolutely everything. So the contract detailed some of that. It detailed, what else did it detail? It got into some really heavy topics that we needed to talk about. So termination, when we agreed that termination would or wouldn't happen. And in our case, we agreed that unless there was absolutely zero viability of life, then baby would be carried to term, or as much as could be. Now, having said that, so we happen to be on the same page about that. But if something happened and something happened with baby and we knew about it when baby was, before 20 weeks or after 20 weeks, regardless of that, and the dads changed their mind and they said, actually, we don't want to continue with this pregnancy, even though we had the contract that said that we agreed that we would, they don't get a say at the end of the day. If I say that I want to carry baby and not go through with the termination, that's what happens, because it's my body. So that was laid out in the contract very clearly, but at the end of the day, I could have made any choice that I needed to. And we knew that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an important piece, even though I've signed the contract and said, I agree to X or what have you, I can still change my mind and they can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
It didn't come to that, and it didn't even come close to that. But I think that that's a really important thing, because maybe you're signing it and you've sort of got these ideas of what's going to happen. But then when it comes down to it, if you have to make a choice that you've only thought about but never actually have to make, maybe it's not the choice you thought, like the decision you thought you would have made.
Yeah.
So, and I knew that the entire time, that I always essentially had the final say, no matter what led to us to that point.
Mm.
So that was always really helpful to know that we had an agreement, and I knew their thoughts on just about everything, but that at the end of the day, they couldn't ask me to or tell me to do anything, because it's my body. And that was always, the overarching everything. Yeah.
Did that also include like tests, like, getting tested for diabetes? Yeah, everything.
Yeah, absolutely anything you can imagine. And we did. So I carried 2 babies, and it's with the same family. Everyone always asks. It's with the same family. So they are carried, both of their sweet little girls. I only carry girls. That's the one thing that, like, if I had like a rating for my surrogacy, I'm like a 4 out of 5, because I only carry girls, I guess. No boys in this womb. That's just how it's been. That's it's just a joke I like to make, that I'm creating a girl army. But yeah, we had to talk about everything. So with their first beautiful baby, who's now almost 2, we didn't do the NIPT testing, and that's just how it went. And then with the second baby, they just said, oh yeah, no, we're going to do it. I said, sure, that's fine. Like, it didn't matter to me. I just said, I just want to make sure, because we didn't do it with your first beautiful baby, and you had previously said you didn't want to, and now you're saying you do want to. I have absolutely zero problem doing it. It's your baby. Like, and that's how my mindset was.
Yeah. Just for the listener, the NIPT is a blood test. Like, it's just a blood draw, and then it gives it's like almost accurate for testing for Down syndrome. And then it's not that accurate, but it also tests for 4 other chromosomal disorders. But yeah.
Yes. Sorry. My
no, that's okay. That's what I'm here for.
But if I didn't want to do that test, I didn't have to. And I always knew that. And my mindset was that I was happy to do it. So yeah, it detailed absolutely everything. If I needed time off work, let's say I was very unwell and I had become pregnant, it was very unwell, it detailed the pay, like they would essentially pay me to be off. Like, they would pay my salary. So there is zero payment for surrogacy in Canada. You cannot pay someone to be a surrogate aside from covering all their expenses. So if I was off work for any reason, they would, and my work, my sick leave ran out or what have you, then they would pay my salary. So that's the only way that they would do that. And that includes mat leave. So my work doesn't happen to pay mat leave. So we get, so I would just get EI. So they would pay the difference up until my full salary for a certain amount of time. Like, and we had detailed what that would be. So every single piece of that was all laid out. Make sure that that I was taken care of, and that to reduce the burden on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really important. I think that people know, like, it's, that it's, every piece of the contract was essentially to keep me safe. And my lawyer, like, he was a bit more aggressive than I was. And he's like, no, we need this in here to take care of you. Like, and that's what his job was, right? To make sure that I was taken care of. I never felt taken advantage of, but there were a lot of parameters in place to make sure that I was kept safe. And even if I happen to have my own life insurance, but if I didn't have life insurance, they would have to buy me life insurance, essentially. Yeah,
it's really interesting. When you got to the point where you were getting pregnant, it was IVF?
Yes.
Yeah.
They have embryos, and they still have some embryos that were created. And so I would go to their clinic in Toronto, and they would thaw those babies, those beautiful little the one embryo. It's always one embryo in Canada. You can't even ask for more. Oh, you know what? Maybe I'm not correct on that. But we always did one embryo transfer. And it was these beautiful frozen embryos. And we would go, and at that point, it was sort of standard IVF. Aside from the fact that genetically these babies are not mine and were never mine. But the rest of it is is a typical IVF transfer.
Yeah, cool. And do you mind if I ask, like, did you get pregnant right away, or?
No. No, I absolutely don't mind. So with the first beautiful baby, who's now almost 2, it was the second transfer that we did. So the first one, we did a hormonal transfer where I went on a lot of estrogen. And that was something we agreed to. Like, we agreed to try that way, even though I joke about how much it was. I agreed to do this. So I went on a lot of estrogen. We did the hormonal way, and it didn't take. And then the next one, the guys and I talked, and we asked to do a non-hormonal transfer. I said, I know my body really well. I trust my body. Like, I let's try it that way. And they agreed to that. So, and we got pregnant with that cycle, which was, so the second cycle with the first beautiful baby, and the second little one, who's now 2 months old, just got here. It was on the first cycle, and it was a non-hormonal as well. And there was one point where the physician, my LH spike was late. So the luteinizing hormone that shows that you're about to ovulate, mine was later than what you might consider average. For my body, that was normal. For the physician, she wanted it to happen sooner. So the nurse called me one day and said, we're going to get you on some estrogen. We want it to happen faster. I said, no. And I had talked to the guys. I said, this is what they're asking. I don't know why they're asking, and I don't feel comfortable. And I said, yep, we agree. We don't want that to happen either. So I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Let's wait. Can we wait? And this is what we've talked about. I don't know why we're changing the plan. So the physician, she let me wait. I mean, she didn't have a choice. I didn't take the estrogen, and I had my LH surge within a timeline that I felt was more normal for my body. And we did it that way. And then beautiful baby was implanted a few days after that, and it was successful. And I'm really happy with and whether it would have been successful or not, I'm still happy with what we chose to do, and to listen to the plan that we had in place, and to not listen to sort of the urgency that was kind of being pushed at us.
Yeah. You followed your intuition, you advocated for yourself, and you created yourself like a team, like the people that are the legal parents, like they really were appreciative of you. I feel like it was like that, and that they supported you, because I think they felt that you were intuitive about your body too. Yeah. And because you radiate that, like I can kind of hear it, that like you just know. And so that's like really That's really cool. And yeah, urgency and fear, like the opposite of intuition. And so it's like I think that your pregnancy happened because you did that, you know? So yeah, that's really awesome, because I think that all the hormones that sometimes people go on um can feel like a burden for some people. It may be helpful for someone, but
Yeah.
a burden for some other people. Yeah. I'm also wondering, did anyone educate you on how like these pregnancies and these births could be different from your own, and that you could end up with like complications that you didn't have with your other ones?
Yeah. And I didn't go into this sort of like with rose tinted glasses thinking like, oh, I've had babies. I know how to have babies. Everything is going to go along that path. Like there's a reason that in these agreements, you make sure you have life insurance. Like there's a very, like you need to go in open eyed and to know it is a safe and natural thing. But there are always risks. So let's be mindful. Like let's not just sort of be ignorant to all the different layers. Genetically, these babies are not mine. So my body is reacting to them in a different way. I know what happened with my girls, but that doesn't mean that that will happen with these beautiful babies. So yeah, I was very open-eyed going in with everything, and the babies genetically, the two beautiful girls that I carried, they have different genetic makeups as well, right? So even from one to the next, just with their own genetic makeup. So even just, oh, I've carried one of their beautiful babies, it'll be the same. I knew it wouldn't be, and it wasn't. So I think a lot of it was just having just my own expectations. Yeah, my body is going to do different things, and these babies are different. And I don't know that I have a beautiful, wonderful midwife who Mel.
Mhm.
And I was very purposeful in making sure that we could have her for this journey too, because she was there for my first two babies, Tessa and Alice. So a lot of that continuity and her knowing me was really, really helpful. And she was the midwife for all she was part of our midwife journey for all four of the babies. And I think that that was massive, just having that conversation and trusting her and just being able to have open conversations was just so, so helpful. So I don't know that there was ever a specific conversation of, things here's how this could go, but it was just always a constant conversation that was really open and flowing with everything.
Yeah. Would you mind telling us about the births? There's like you, yeah, you're okay with that. There's like this really kind of, it turned famous in the world of birth. Like if you're a birth nerd, there's like a picture at the birth center of a surrogate, and the baby is born, and she's passing the baby still attached to the umbilical cord.
Oh, I didn't know that was a surrogate. I know exactly what picture you're talking about.
Yeah, there's that picture, and I'm just wondering, like, did you decide to have the legal parents with you at birth, or did you need?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's and I love talking about this too, and the logistics of carrying someone else's baby are just so it's just there's a lot of logistics with carrying someone else's baby. And the dads, at first they lived in Toronto, and then they moved up to Barrie eventually, so not in Ottawa, right? Not close. And that was a part of what we had talked about too in the contract. It wasn't detailed as much in the contract, like the actual birth, but I delivered at Mulflora. That's where beautiful midwife practices out of. So as part of that, we had to fill out paperwork, like surrogacy agreement paperwork, and with the midwife clinic as well, I think, to say like, what are your parameters, knowing that this is a surrogacy agreement, who is involved in each step, who is allowed to have information, that kind of thing. Because I was the client, it wasn't the dads, even though it is their baby. So there was a very firm understanding, like day one, that I am the client. So if the dads, called the clinic and said, hey, we need X information on our surrogate, they understood that that would never be okay, and that it would never be released because I was the client. And then as soon as baby was born, baby actually isn't the midwife's client anymore. I am only the client, right? So there was a lot of things that we had to learn about so many different things. But yeah, we had to detail exactly who was allowed to be present for a birth, And for any appointments, like the dads were in Toronto, but I would call them in if they wanted to be there. And that was always my choice. If there was ever an appointment where I didn't want them to be there, I could say that. And everyone knew that. But yeah, who was allowed to be in the room, not in the room? Did I want them there right away? That kind of thing. Absolutely everything was detailed. And we all like, and essentially the dads, they said, whatever you want to me, which was so beautiful. And yeah, I wanted them there. Of course I wanted for me, of course I wanted them there. So they were there in the room both times for both beautiful babies. And just before I forget, I do want to say, so if there was ever a C-section, so we had to detail this in the paperwork for the hospital as well. If there was ever a C-section, we had to say there's only one person allowed in the room when that's happening. So I had filled out all this paperwork and I said, okay, which one of you would want to be in the room? Because I need to fill that out for the paperwork. And they said, no, it's not us. You get Brian in the room. It's about you. It's not about us in that moment. And I thought that was so, like, I was sort of, even though it's exactly how they had been the whole time, I was still sort of shocked by it. Like, I thought that would have been the piece where they said, oh, do you mind if we are, one of us is there? But they said, no, like it's about you in that moment. We will meet baby later. You get your person.
Yeah.
Which was really, we didn't, there were no C-sections for their babies, so we didn't have to get there. But it was so nice to know that even in that like moment where they had the chance to meet their baby, they said, no, it's about you. Mm-hmm. So yes, they were both there. So their first beautiful baby, one of the dads, he's a physician, so he was working the night before and he drove from Barrie. He arrived at 1 a.m. And I went into labor at 1:15 a.m. and baby was born at 4:52. Oh gosh, 4:54. No, 4:52. 4:52. So he made it just in time, but he was very tired. But yes, they were both in the room, and my husband was in the room too, which is what we knew would be the plan. And we just hoped that they all made it there. And then I got the beautiful golden hour with baby on my chest. And that was, I didn't think, not that I didn't think, but I thought, how beautiful it is that I get this moment, even though it's their baby and I've been with them for 9 months and they're still giving me more, So I had that beautiful hour with her. And then, yeah. And even with second baby, so after the hour, one of the dads turns to my husband and he says, do you want to hold her? And I said, you haven't even held her yet. Like it was so beautiful. And I said, no, like you get to hold her. Of course, my husband was okay with that too. He said, no, it's your time. But it was really nice. Yeah. And if I ever wanted them not to be there, I could have said that in the moment to be like, get out. But it was really nice how it all happened and the timing of it. And then the time they came down for the second baby, of course, they had their beautiful little 1.5-year-old. So the logistics of it were a little more complicated. But yeah, they were there and like we even had to determine who would cut the cord and like that kind of thing. Like there's so many layers we had to discuss in advance. But yeah, it all was really open. So I'm very grateful for that. And one thing that we didn't have in our surrogacy sort of partnership and agreement, we didn't use a surrogacy agency. And that was something we chose not to do. We have been friends for 15 plus years. So we felt like we were okay to manage those layers on our own. There's a fee that goes to the surrogacy agency as well. So some of that was like, why would we have the dads pay for something that we're comfortable doing ourselves? And we knew that there was a risk to sort of our friendship and our relationship, right? To sort of go through those layers and, it could be more difficult because we don't have that person as a third party, but I'm so glad that we didn't have that agency. It was just so easy. And I know that isn't maybe what is common, but I'm so glad that we didn't use an agency. but we were friends before. So I think that's important that we already had a relationship. Maybe it would be different if we didn't have that relationship. But I'm so glad that we didn't, because it saved the money, which is so fantastic. But also we didn't need that third party to have all these conversations and to help us navigate. Like, I think we did a really good job navigating, and it taught us a lot as we went through as well. Like, I think it was good that we had those conversations just with us.
Yeah. I had a client who was a surrogate, and the legal parents, they wish actually that there wouldn't have been this other, like, I know that they were really respectful of the surrogate, and it was a really respectful dynamic. And yeah, like I understand the not need for an agency, like in those regards. I have a few questions. Okay, so when I read and what I hear from, the world of birth, is sometimes people are like, sometimes the baby is born and the mom attaches herself to the baby and doesn't want to, like, give the baby to the legal parents. I'm just wondering, because you were saying that you had some skin to skin with the baby, like, what happened with you?
And this is typically, that's like the very first question people ask, like, how are you going to say goodbye? Or, how are you going to be able to do that? Like, are you worried you won't be able to say goodbye? And I never had a moment of doubt, not even like one fleeting moment, where I wouldn't be able to say goodbye. Of course, it's hard to say goodbye to people you love. And it wasn't goodbye. They're still in these beautiful babies are still in my life. I talk to the dads nonstop, like, not absolutely nonstop. They're still very much part of our lives. And so they are my nieces, and they're my girls' cousins. And that's a language that we've agreed upon. And that is so beautiful. And it fits. They are my nieces, and they're more than nieces, but they are my nieces. Of course, it's hard to say goodbye to people you love, but they're not my babies. They are something very special and very deeply, different and beautiful and wonderful to me that I will never have with any other human, but they're not my babies. So I was happy to say goodbye and for them to go where they were meant to go. It was never something I couldn't do. And of course it was hard, but it was never, I can't do this. It was just like, I love you, little girl. Like, I will miss you, but you're going where you're meant to go.
Yeah.
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 But I kind of took a gamble on myself, right? Like, until you've done something, it's sort of like, I think I'll be okay to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never done it. So it did happen the way that I thought that it would happen. But of course I have no idea until I have to say goodbye how I'll actually feel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was hard, but it was never impossible.
Yeah. I've never I haven't had like a ton, like there isn't a ton of surrogates. There's only like maybe 400 or 500 in all of Canada every year. But so I've had a few surrogate clients, and I've never had that problem. It shows up, like people talk about it, but I've never seen it. And there's a sweetness to it too. It's like emotionally, like you're giving like the biggest gift in the whole world to people that couldn't do it for themselves physically, so I think that's like what kind of surrounds the emotion that surrounds it all too. And I think it's really sweet that you did the skin to skin, because the baby has been colonized with your gut, has been in your side of you, and your body is what responds to her still. And so for that first hour, I think it's a really healthy thing for babies to have access to the surrogates' mothers' bodies, because they've always had that. And then plus you got to have delayed cord clamping. I'm assuming that if everything was fine, that so that like it. So I think that's really good for baby. Just physically speaking, and thinking as a midwife,
The dads, like, they are not from Ottawa, but they stayed in each case. I think it was like 2 weeks with each baby. So I got to see baby like for a good amount of time. And like they would come to, they would come to our house. They would be with us and our family, and I would get to, and this is something we agreed upon, I would get to nurse baby whenever she was here, whenever each of them were here, which again was so special and beautiful. And yeah, it was just, yeah, it was so nice. I'm just remembering an instance where I was talking with actually Mel in the kitchen, and the dads were here, and they kind of walked by and handed her to me, and then I just started feeding her, like, and there was no words, and it was just sort of, it was like it was just sort of a silent, like, hey, can you help? She's needing something. I was like, yeah, that's okay. Let me feed her. And it was just sort of this thing that happened, and it was so beautiful and natural, and it was me with this beautiful little girl that I was just able to help them with.
Yeah. Did your milk come in? Did you express milk for her? Like, was that a thing? Yeah.
Yeah, my milk came in, and I with the newest little one who's 2 months old. Like, I remember at one point I asked, I was like, I'm gonna nurse. She was still on me. We were in that golden hour. I was like, she's hungry. I'm gonna nurse her. I don't know why I'm asking, but I'm gonna nurse her. But yeah, milk came in with both of them, and I would pump with each babe, and I would deliver the milk. I had a little milk delivery service, so that when I wasn't there, if they wanted to, they could use that expressed milk. And they were using formula as well, because I wasn't pumping in a way to only have the babies having my milk. It was just, I have some, let me use it while you're here if they want to use it. And then whenever I was with baby, and if she was hungry, I would feed her. Yeah. And then it just took a few days, and once they left town, I would just, express enough to relieve the pressure. And then it just took a few days, and then my body stopped producing the milk, which, yeah, and I was able to breastfeed my own girls too. So I had that sort of knowledge of my own journey, which was helpful to know sort of my own limits. And I knew that I didn't want to pump around the clock, and that I hated pumping. So with my own girls, I hated it. So with these beautiful little babies, I knew that I would pump, but not in an effort to only feed her my milk.
Yeah.
And I could have pumped and then mailed it to the guys, and we just agreed that they were okay to not have that happen, and I was okay to not do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and like logistically, I can see why it would be a big thing. Plus, the drop in milk too is something that we have to mitigate. You have to get like lactation consultants or a midwife that's really knowledgeable in breastfeeding and what that does to your body and things like that. All right, so are there things like you do talk about how like you guys like kind of chose each other and it worked really well, and there was a lot of appreciation and support and respect, but is anything in the medical, and I'm sorry, anything in the Canadian system that helped make that happen, like just for like the other, like a person who's looking for a surrogate, person who's looking, they want to be a surrogate and they're looking for a good like legal parents, basically. Are there things in Canada that made it fairer, better, easier?
It was honestly probably easier. And this is the biggest piece of it, the Canadian versus other systems, is that there is no payment. Like, and for me, that actually made it easier to know that this was like, that wasn't even an option. And there were some choices I had to make. Like, I didn't take mat leave, and I could have. And I could have been paid for that, and I chose not to. So you do get taken care of, right? You're not being paid. For me, it was so much easier to not have that layer. And I felt very well taken care of, very supportive. There were things that I did need to look into, such as like, could I use my own insurance to, like, could it pay for things related to the baby, right? Like, if I needed to take a prescription medicine, is it okay that I'm claiming it through my own insurance, right? There's some legalities that I had to look into. The lawyers were great for that. So it was helpful, especially for our first time, to have those lawyers. but no, I like, it was just such a supportive system. And even like at the midwife clinic, they're like, hey, we've got our surrogacy paperwork. They would pull it out, like it was so helpful. In the hospitals as well. It was sort of like a black box for us, right? We had never been through this before. My family hadn't. So a lot of it was learning, but it always felt really safe and supported. Yeah, we were very good advocates for ourselves. And I know that. So I, I would say that helped a lot to the fact that this wasn't my first pregnancy. And a lot of agencies, well, they do prefer if for a surrogate it is not your first pregnancy. And I can understand that. You're not excluded from being a surrogate if you have not had any pregnancies. You're also not excluded if your family is not done, but it is preferred because, of course, something could happen and maybe something would happen that would not allow me to have more children of my own if I wanted to. So you do have to sort of have that awareness. But being an advocate for yourself, like even just getting my own pap results, I was so on. It was still it was very COVID-y still. So things were very, very delayed, but I was very on top of it. And the nurse at my own clinic was so kind. And she was like, as soon as they come, I'm calling you. Like, I understand the layers of this. Like, it was being an advocate for yourself within the medical system, I think is always important if you can. But no, it felt very easy and normal to navigate the medical system in that way. Yeah, I don't know that I answered the question, but
No, you did.
It felt really easy, even though there were a lot of layers and a lot of red tape and things like that. Just like the clinic wouldn't talk to us until we had the contract, which I think is important. That's there to protect people. Yeah, and then I had to be medically cleared again for a second baby, right? Like it was, they take care of you. The only thing that was sort of a bit interesting and that I understand is different in others, so not for surrogacy. So for example, if you are donating a kidney, which is very different, if you're donating a kidney, there is a physician that you have and a physician that the recipient has, two totally different physicians. They so that there is zero conflict of interest. In this case, the physician who was my physician at the fertility clinic is the same physician for the dads and the baby. So some of that, like when there was sort of that urgency being pushed on us, I feel like there was some conflict there because the physician is the same for all of us. And it was, of course, the physician wants this to be successful. And we all do too, but it did feel a little bit like a conflict. Like it was not necessarily what is best for me and my body in that case. It was what is best for the end result of let's have a baby, which of course is what we all want. But that did feel a little bit not great. And luckily, I had these fantastic dads who were very open and we had the same, we agreed on the same things that no, we do not need to push this and we are going to, even if it doesn't work, we are going to let this happen the way that I trust my body. Even if I'm wrong, that's okay. So that did feel a little bit not great. But I think that I don't think there's another way that it could be done, right? Like, I think that is the system. So just be mindful. Be an advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like why are we suddenly changing a plan? What has changed other than I didn't have a spike within the 12 to 14 day range? Okay, what does that mean though? Does it mean anything? No, it just means I didn't. So that I think I would be, I would just be take care of yourself, right? Not that the doctor was doing anything that was unethical or wrong, but of course there were two different goals in mind, right?
Yeah.
Yes, taking care of me, but also to the baby. And with second baby, we did have some complications early on in pregnancy, and I was put on bed rest, which After a few weeks, I spoke with the physician. I said, "You have to take me off of this. This is not good for my mental health. And why am I on this? Like, that's never been explained. And I know why I'm on bed rest, but also no one's." Anyway, it got really messy, and the dads were 100% behind me. They said, "Yeah, this isn't making sense, and we're okay with you speaking to the physician, but also to stop doing this."
Yeah.
So that was, again, another instance of just advocacy, and where I felt like there was some conflict, where it's, are we taking care of this beautiful baby, which of course we should be doing, but at the detriment of what? And in that case, it was my mental health and my and there was a lot of other factors, but that's sort of a point where I felt, this, I can see how there's conflict here. Nothing unethical, but it didn't feel great all the time.
Yeah. The other thing is that bed rest is actually really not studied.
No,
There's no
there's
benefit.
no reason for it. There's no benefit. It's detrimental to mom's health. And in the case of, the reason I was on bed rest, there's nothing in the literature to suggest that it actually has a positive impact.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was having these conversations and making these decisions, I had that information as well. And I was speaking with the midwife. We hadn't been transferred to her care yet too, which is why it was also a little bit complicated, because for reasons. So if we'd been transferred and as soon as we got transferred to the midwife's care, she was like, "Yeah, stop doing X, Y, and Z. Like, we don't need these things." Like, which was what I knew was coming. But yeah, the bed rest was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
Yeah, totally. Like I understand you from a midwife perspective. Yeah. Do you have any advice that you give women who want to be a surrogate or parents who are looking for a surrogate?
That's such a good question. A lot of the questions that folks ask, and I love when people ask questions, are they're like, "Are you worried it's going to be hard?" and that kind of thing. That's the very first question people ask usually. And I sort of remind them, I said, "It's not my baby." And I think a lot of when people sort of picture me saying goodbye, it's in the realm of like, if this was my baby and I'm saying goodbye, and I say, "You remember, that's adoption, and that is hard. That probably is a much more difficult scenario. And I can't imagine that scenario. And I'm grateful that I've never been in that scenario, but that's not what this is." And then usually it's, "Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. That's the lens that it's being viewed at. This is not my baby, and it never was my baby. And it is something beautiful and special that can't be described, but they're not my babies." And you go into it with that knowledge, right? And I think it's very different in a situation where it's adoption, where you probably have to grapple with a lot of different things and to make a very difficult decision. In this case, the baby was and is, they're not my baby. From the minute that I meet them, when they're implanted into me, they're not my baby, and I know that. Yeah, and it's the most beautiful thing. And I haven't found a way to say this yet where it doesn't sound absolutely sort of ridiculous, but I think that this is like, these babies are meant to be here on this earth, and I just help them get here. But I feel like this is what I was made to do. And I know that that sounds so ridiculous, but it's sort of like, as soon as I sort of opened up, could I do this? It was like, wait, I have to do this. Like, it was what was meant to be. And I just needed to figure it out and then to do it. And whether it was with this family or another family, I think I would have got there anyway. But it just felt so right. And the second we made the decision, my husband and I, it was like this beautiful weight had been lifted. And I was so happy. I was like, even if it doesn't work out, like, I'm so happy to be on this journey, that it just felt so right. And then for parents, like, and I feel, I really do feel for parents, and especially, in our case, it was a male same-sex couple. And I think, they face a lot of barriers, and I was very grateful to be able to sort of removed some of those, and just because it was me, right? And I'm a friend, and it was easier in that sense. But it's just it's not, I happen to fall in love with a man, and we happen to be able to have a baby. The fact that they each fell in love with a man too, and it's, what is the difference? Obviously there's lots of differences, but why can't they have the family that they want, and why do I get to have mine? So I feel very, yeah, I feel for families who know that they want things, and sometimes they can't have them, and um, you can put all the effort into the world to trying to make it happen, but maybe it still won't. And that's true of like the fact that my husband and I have these beautiful babies that didn't need to have happened, but we have more options.
Yeah.
And I was so grateful to be able to help them, because it doesn't make sense. It's luck of the draw in a sense, right? So I do feel for parents who are trying to have families and aren't able to, for whatever reasons, whether it's a same-sex couple or not. Yeah, and it's so interesting. Like, how I don't know what a normal way is that you find a surrogate. I know how our way happened. I don't know what the standard sort of would be, like how you match if it's someone you don't know. So I can't really comment on that, but I can only imagine that it's like putting your heart out there and just sort of probably having it crushed a good number of times, and just sort of not having any control over a lot of it. And I think that it has to be so difficult, and I feel so deeply for those families. Yeah, the lack of control must just be exhausting.
Yeah. That's what also being a parent is too. So
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something that you said, you were like, this is what I meant to do. And I know that you think it sounds really sappy, but really, like, I've heard women say that about their own births and pregnancies. Like, I mean, like non-surrogate.
Mhm.
And it's incredible. I know there's so much fear around birth and being pregnant and all these tests that come, like, there's so many false positives in pregnancy. Like it's like the tests are really not accurate. But I also want to say though that, like, when you see a mother on the other side and all you did was give her reassurance, because that's basically what it is, it's and the way that you said it is the exact same way. Like, there's a confidence that you followed your joy. Somehow it led you to surrogacy, and like, it feels really meant to be from like your situation. And so yeah, so it's just one of the messages I want, like, through my podcast is to, like, alleviate fear around birth, and as you're doing that, like, your essence is like doing that. So oh yeah, and then I have another question. Did you wait, you delivered at Montfort both times with these two girls? Okay.
Yeah, and that was actually, and before I forget, so one of the things, these dads, one of them is in the medical field, which can sometimes overload of information when you're talking about certain things, or when you're going into pregnancy, which is a medical thing, and in some, it is now a medical thing, I think. But you have too much information, you have too much knowledge of the medical world sometimes. So one of the things that I asked for and they agreed to, I said, I want a midwife. I had obviously amazing experience with midwives, and I said, I want a midwife for this birth. They said, yep. They said, we probably wouldn't have chosen a midwife, but that's okay. Can we have a hospital delivery though? That was the one thing they asked. I said, absolutely. I'm okay with that. I said, as long as you know that my second baby was an accidental home birth. So, but that midwives are trained for that. So as long as we know that sometimes it's out of my control, obviously. I said, I want a midwife. And after we were leaving their last midwife appointment with Mel, and after the first baby, and they said, we had no idea that midwives were so amazing. And we're so glad that you asked, like, that you wanted the midwife. They wouldn't have chosen that on their own, right? And I think you don't know what you don't know. So I'm so grateful and I'm so glad that they were open to that. And yeah, because I think it changed everything, right? Having a provider that I knew that was what I wanted and I trusted and I had this continuity was everything. But they would not have chosen that if they hadn't known. So I love now that they know how amazing midwives are, which everyone should know. And I just think I'm so grateful that they were so open to it. And if they hadn't been, that would have been a different conversation, right? But they were, yeah, whatever you want, but can we please have a hospital birth? I said, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was an okay layer, right? I wasn't going to fight for a home birth. Like that was never something that I needed. And if it made them comfortable, then I was very happy to do that. But yes, I'm very glad that they now know how amazing midwives are.
Yeah. I have had clients who really wanted their home birth and they still got to have the home birth and the legal parents be around. And so I know that exists as well. And that's like a conversation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was just their request. And I didn't have a problem with that request. If it had been a home birth, that would have been okay too. That was just for them. That's what helped them feel more comfortable. And that was okay with me. If I had said no, honestly, they probably would have been okay with that too.
Yeah.
But they didn't ask for a lot. So and I didn't have a problem with it.
Yeah. Some people are more attached to home birth than some others. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had a home birth with my second and it happened and that was fine. And if it had happened with these two girls as well, that would have been okay. Right. Like we all know we're not in control of the situation at a certain point. But it worked out, which, yeah, but they now understand that midwives are amazing and they're a health practitioner that you don't know unless you know. So I think a lot of it was just educating. No, midwives are amazing. They can do so much. The access is incredible. The relationship that you build is like nothing else. And it's so much, from my perspective, it's so much better than what you would get from an OB, like especially now that I know. So I'm very grateful that they were open to that, especially with one of them being in the medical field. I find there tends to be a lot of fear from folks who are in the medical field because you see worst case scenarios most days. So sort of being open to, yeah, we will go with something that I don't know. Yeah, so I'm very grateful for that. Taking a lot of the fear away, I think. Yeah.
Respect and education, like using knowledge to also feel like they're confident in what what their baby is going through. And
exactly. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's their baby, so they need to be comfortable with the choices. So, and they built in their own parameters of how to make themselves comfortable with, can we have a hospital birth? And I'm glad that they asked for that, right? If it makes them comfortable, then that helps with a lot of other things that we're dealing with, right?
Yeah. At the end of episodes, I ask people about intuition and where it led you, and I feel like your intuition we could kind of feel where it was throughout the whole episode. And then I sometimes also ask what does your intuition feel? And it's joy, like you answered it already. Yeah. And also non-urgency. So you've already answered the question basically. And then,
there's no need for fear. There's, we don't need to make decisions based on fear and urgency. There is no need for that. And I feel like a lot of especially in the fertility world, where folks might be struggling with fertility, in this case, it was a same-sex male couple, so different. But I feel like there's a lot of fear mongering, and it's just it can be quite predatory. And just sort of letting your intuition have a say. And I know that's not always going to be the case, and it's not always an option. But I'm very grateful for being able to listen to it. And having sort of that backing of the guys, just sort of, we trust you, is what they would say. We trust you, which was so, so helpful. Even if I was going to be wrong, I knew that no one, that they wouldn't be upset, or why did you make that decision? It's just, it happened to work out, but I wasn't worried, either way.
Mm. The other question that I ask people is just about community or quality relating, and how you make that work for you and build it and keep it, kind of thing. Like what you've already mentioned is basically having community and friendship led you to do this and led them to have children. So, and then like you were also talking about your relationship with your partner, and like I know that there was support there. But do you have anything else to add to that? Like,
Yeah. So B, my husband, Brian, he is everything. And I think that his piece cannot be under highlighted. He's part of, like, in the contract and everything we did. There's 4 people in the contract. It's the 2 dads, me and Brian. Like, he had to have been on board for everything, like legally, but also if he hadn't been on board, like if he had signed it, he was like, whatever, it wouldn't have worked. Like, he needed to be on board every step of the way, and none of this could have happened without his support. And that cannot be understated, how helpful he was in every single step of the way. And this beautiful baby is a part of his life in a way that can't be explained properly either, right? Like, he went through this too. So I think his role, having that partner who is just part of it and just on your side, is just everything. Like, it would have been so much harder if I didn't have him from every respect. Yeah, before I did this, I actually, now that I'm talking about it, a few years before I started doing this, I actually, like, anonymously posted on, like, a mother's group to be like, anyone have any experience with surrogacy? And, like, so I feel like it's always been waiting for me. And one thing that one mom told me who had done surrogacy that actually was really true. She said, I said, what are some things that you would warn me about? She said, it is really lonely. I said, what do you mean? She said, it's hard because the people that you are with, and, this is not your partner's baby, right? So in her case, there was sort of less of a connection. And just, the people that you see every day, like this baby is not, it's different than if it was your baby. And a lot of folks maybe just don't even know how to be, or, can I ask you about it? They don't want to trigger you or anything. And it's so unintentionally, it can be lonely. So I do understand what that mom was saying in that sense. I am very grateful to have a fantastic midwife, an amazing partner, these 2 dads who would give me the moon if I asked. And we just nonstop talk to each other still. But during, I would have, like, a puke counter that I would, send them every time I would throw up, and, like, from morning sickness. And, like, I always had them and my husband, but I do understand how it could be very lonely. So I do appreciate having that knowledge going into it. But I just, it's so ironic that before I even started this journey, I was sort of looking for information that I didn't know I needed. Yeah, having the community is really helpful.
yeah, and that, I was just like, because you're talking about Brian, it made me realize, like, with your own baby, every time the baby moves, you get to be excited and show your partner and put their hand on your belly.
Yeah.
But then, like, the partner might have boundaries around, like, not attaching to this, like, baby potentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And in B's case, like, I'd be like he wasn't scared of attaching to the baby, and they happen to be his friends as well, right? But maybe in a case where you don't know the family, like, it is truly a like someone that you've connected with through an agency. Maybe you don't know the family, right? So it's like, well, that baby is going to that family, and I don't really know that family. So I didn't have that in the same way. But yeah, that's exactly it. It's, oh, someone come feel this joy with me. Oh, this joy doesn't maybe mean as much to anyone else that's around me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's really important too. And in our case, we both happen to be friends with the dads. So that did help. B would have been excited anyway. He's just the best. But I can see how that could definitely be a layer where someone maybe is, yeah, that's great, but I need to make my own boundaries, right?
Mhm.
Which I think it is fair if that happens.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, Chandra. I just kind of love, like you said a lot more just with your body language and just what like your essence more like, and so, yeah, I just want to like thank you for like kind of showing like a different way of seeing and going through surrogacy. Yeah. Yeah.
I love talking about it. And yeah, I think there's some people, do you mind if I ask you? Like, 'cause I think if I am having if they thought I was having a hard time, they don't want to trigger, but I absolutely love talking about it. And it's like talking about your kids, right? It's like, well, tell me what they did this weekend. Like nothing, but I'm still gonna like they did everything but nothing. Like but I appreciate that people don't want to trigger, but I absolutely love talking about it. I love talking about all the layers. My beautiful nieces, they're just the sweetest thing. And yeah, it's just been the most beautiful journey. And I want to make sure that I've said all the things I want to say.
Yeah. Mhm.
Let me. Um, there's some funny, and I don't want to talk about the negative, but there are some negative. There's some negative feedback that I've received from people, which is, it doesn't bother me at all, but it is something to be aware of. There are always people who, of course, don't agree with your choices, and that's okay. That shouldn't change why you make them. But I did get some negative comments, some various things that have happened, and that's okay. I truly doesn't impact me. But I've had people say the most aggressive is, you are farming children, you are the baby's mother, and you are ripping them away from you, like that kind of thing, which I don't believe is true. And I know that that's not true. But maybe if you were having a difficult time, that's a really hard and hurtful thing to hear. And that could make things a lot harder for you. So just there are negatives. It's not all good.
Mhm.
I had someone say, is this legal what you're doing? Like, yes, it's legal. Yes, it's very legal. I've had people say, I can't believe you're doing this. They're taking advantage of you. They should be paying with you. I don't understand how you're letting them take advantage of you. I do not feel taken advantage of. And in that case, I had to ask that person to stop. I said, like, I am okay. I feel very empowered. I do not feel taken advantage of. You said this a few times now in a few different ways. Multiple times, I'm asking you to stop now. I am okay. I appreciate what you're trying to say, but I need you to stop.
Yeah.
So I think knowing your own boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And sort of, I was very sure of all of my choices. But maybe if you're not, that could be really hurtful and damaging.
Today I feel I'm like, is there any decision that someone can make and not trigger another person? And it doesn't feel like there is.
Right?
So we have to like understand that that like those people are coming from their own place, I guess. Like, yeah, and it's great that you set your own boundaries too, because it needed to happen. And sometimes it also makes us have our own boundaries. Like, we're not going to tell them what's happening in our home, right? Yeah,
exactly. And in that case, it's just we're not going to agree. So I need you to, in this case, we're just going to stop. But yeah, being aware it's not all good, but it's so much good. But yeah, there are people who will think that you're wrong.
yeah,
And that's okay. So just sort of, be ready for that. And it's such a small minority, but it I don't want to glaze over, right? That there's good with the bad.
yeah.
Bad with the good.
Like I said at the beginning, in other places and in other circumstances, people can be taken advantage of. And so like, it's important to have the discussions, but not to impose them on someone else, basically. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I know that I am not taken advantage of. Someone might hear me say that and still think that I am, and that's okay. I wouldn't agree with them, but that's okay. But yeah, just as long as, yeah, I never felt taken advantage of, not even the littlest bit. And I feel so much joy with all the decisions I've made. And I'm so grateful to be able to have done them. Like, I feel like really it was a gift for me to have been able to do this. And that sounds so cheesy, I'm sure. But that's how I know that it's right. It was just, it's just, I feel so glad to be in these girls' lives and to be someone to them, whoever that is, but also just to know them and to have them here. Like, it feels like such a gift.
Mm. Thank you so much, Chandra. You covered everything on your list there?
I did, yeah.
Okay, super. Thank you to the listener, and have a good day.